Hello and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be looking at switch case statements in Java. So switch case statements are kind of like conditionals, right? They're similar to if statements and else statements, but they're a little more restricted. So in an if statement or an if else statement, what would you do? You would basically check for a condition, and based on a condition, you would do something, right? You would execute a block of code, let's say. Now I'm going to describe a simple program, right? So let's say the program involves taking input from the user and checking if the number is a 1, a 2, or a 3. So I can do this easily using an if statement. I can just say if the number, let's just say the number is in a variable, let's say it's num. So if number is equal to 1, I'm going to tell the user, I'm going to print, so SOPLN or System.out.println. This is just an abbreviation for that. So let's just say SOPLN 1. Let's just tell the user that the number is a 1. And then I can say else if, right, if it's not 1, maybe it's 2. And in this way, I can do this simple program using if and else if statements. But the thing is, I can also do the exact same thing using switch case statements. So what a switch case statement basically does is that it checks for equality. That's also what we did before. We checked if a number that the user entered is equal to 1, or if it's equal to 2, or if it's equal to 3. A switch case statement just allows us to do it much easier, or to write our code better as well. So the way this does is that it checks the equality of a variable, or let's say a number, of a value, like I can say of a value against other values. That's it. Instead of writing multiple else if statements, I can easily structure my code using one switch case statement, basically testing one value against many other values at the same time to find or check for equality. So to understand this better, let's actually just look at the syntax for the switch case statement. So the switch case statement is where the switch and the case are both keywords. And the syntax is pretty simple. Again, what is it doing? It's checking the equality of a value against other values. Usually this value is entered by the user. It's taken as input, right? So what you do generally with switch case statements is, this is the basic syntax. This is how you should be writing it, or this is how the programmers of Java designated or created it to be written as. So switch is a keyword, and it basically tells the compiler that you're using a switch case statement. And then you're going to have these round brackets where you're actually going to put the value. Let's say, for this case, let's say the value is num. So what you're doing is you're checking the equality of this value against these other values. Now, where would you put the other values? You would put the other values in these parentheses. So you would put these parentheses or these curly brackets, and in that you would put the other values. This is where you use something called cases, right? So when I say a case, this could be a certain situation. So the first case is that num could be equal to 1. The second case is that it could be equal to 2. Maybe there's a third case where it could be equal to 3. So you can just see how this is all just simple English, right? I can test num against multiple cases. So case 1. What this is doing is that it's checking the equality of num against 1. Is num equal to this number 1? What's important, and where most people make mistakes, is that they think that case 1 is the name of the case. But no, it's not the name of the case. If I take num as a character, let me just say that num is a character. Let's say this is a character. I can simply write case A. This is checking if this character that I have is equal to A. This isn't the name for the case, right? It's just the value that you're testing, or you're the equality width. Okay, so let's go with our num again. Num case 1. It is basically an if statement. It's checking if num is equal to the number, the integer 1. And if this is true, you would execute something. Let's say we tell the user that it's 1. So let's just print, or let's just tell the user that it's 1. So what you're doing here is basically the same thing that you're doing with an if statement. Num is equal to 1. That's what you're checking, but you're checking it using in a different way. And if this is true, you would execute this block of code that you would write after this semicolon. You know what? To understand this better, let's actually just look at the program, try and understand the switch case statement. So what I'm doing in this program is I'm taking input using a scanner object. If you don't know about that, you can check out my video about how you can take input using a scanner object. So what I'm going to do now is describe a simple program. Basically, the program takes input from the user and uses that input to set an order. So it's kind of like the menu in a restaurant, right? 1 for burger, 2 for pizza, 3 for biryani. So if the user enters a certain number, they would get a certain order. First thing that we're going to do is just tell the user what numbers correspond to what food items. So right now I just printed enter 1 for pizza, enter 2 for burger, enter 3 for biryani. What I'm doing is that I'm taking an input from the user, a numerical input, an integer input, and I'm testing it. And I'm using a switch. I'm going to be using a switch case statement to test if it's 1, if it's 2, or if it's 3. So first thing, let's just take the input. Let's say int value equals sa.nextInt, and this will give me the input from the user. Now I can do this in two ways. I can use if statements. I can just say if value, sorry, I used the wrong brackets. So if value is equal to 1, I can just tell the user that they're going to get pizza. Your pizza is on the way, right? And then I can use else if statements, right? To continue the whole thing. I can say else if value is 2, let's just tell the user your burger is on the way. So you get the idea, right? I can do this using else statements, but it's really inefficient to use so many if and else if statements. Instead, what I can do is test for equality. I can use a switch case statement. So what's the syntax? You would use you would use the switch over here. Now what this is doing is that it's telling the compiler that you are in fact using a switch case statement. And then you would add these brackets and these parentheses. So you would, in the brackets, you would add the value, the number that you're testing for. So if I add value, what I'm going to be doing is I'm testing the equality of value against 1, against 2, against 3. So I need to tell the compiler or the Java program which value am I testing against, right? And now I need to use cases. So first thing, for this is not case 1, remember that. So value, if it's equal to 1, I need to test if it's equal to 1. And if this is true, you would actually use a colon here. And if this is true, if value is equal to 1, you would execute everything after the colon. So in this case, let's just print the same thing. Let's tell the user that their pizza is on the way, right? So what I'm doing is that if value is equal to 1, it's going to execute this. If it's not equal, it's just going to go and test for another case, if there is another case. Now this is very recommended. You need to add the break statement after the first case. After this, I can test for other cases. So what if the user entered 2? I need to test, right? I need to test if value is equal to 2. So case in another condition, another situation, if value is equal to 2, and you add this colon. The colon tells the program that he wants me to execute this if this is true, if both of them are equal. So case 2, I would do the same thing. I would just say your burger is on the way, right? So let me just say your burger is on the way. So let me just do this with the third case as well. Alright, so I completed it with the third case. What you're doing is that, what I'm doing is that, is I'm checking if value is equal to 1. If it is numerically equal, if that is the case, I'm printing this. But if it's not the case, I will test the second case. So let's say value in this case, let's say it's equal to 2. It's going to test for the second case. In this case, value, it's equal to 2. So it's going to execute this and it's going to break, meaning it's going to stop executing everything after it. It doesn't need to. Now, you might have a question, why do I even need to add these break statements, right? Let's actually see what happens without the break statement. Or you know what, let's actually execute this and then remove the break statement. So enter 1 for pizza, enter 2 for burger, enter 3 for biryani. Let me just enter 3 and it's saying your biryani is on the way. It works perfectly well. Now let's just remove the break statements. Now when I execute it, let's say I enter 1 for pizza, it's printing everything after this println statement. Why? So when the program compares value to 1, it sees that yes, the user entered 1 is equal to 1, so it's going to execute this piece of code. But remember, it executes everything after the colon, so it executes everything after the colon, all the println statements after the colon. But if I had break over here, then it's going to see that there's a break statement. It executes everything, right? So it's also going to execute a break statement, and this switch case statement breaks, meaning everything else is not executed. Now, if value is not equal to 1, it's actually not going to execute this. So it's not going to execute the break statement, so we'll just move to case 2 instead. That's why you need to add the break statement, right? If you don't add it, you'll have a condition where everything else is also executed. And if you add a break statement, however, when something is true, all the other useless stuff is not executed. This prevents logical errors, right? Now there's another important statement that you need to know. And this is the default statement. This is basically the else statement. So what if the user entered anything else except 1, 2 or 3? If the user entered 4 or 5 or 6, that is where the default comes into action. So if the user entered anything else, you would just tell the user that what you entered is wrong. There's only 1, 2 or 3. So I'm just going to tell the user that. Let's say we tell the user you entered the wrong number. Basically, the default, what it does is that it's going to be executed when all the cases are false. When none of the cases are executed, you would execute the default, right? So this is very important. It basically functions as the else statement. So pretty simple. You're testing the equality of value against numbers like 1, 2 and 3. If value is equal to a number, numerically equal, you would execute something or a block of code after the colon. So you need to add a colon. Now after you execute that, you definitely need to have a break statement, because, well, if you don't have a break statement, everything, all the println statements are going to be executed, and you don't want that. So if value is equal to, let's say, is not equal to case 1, you would go to case 2. And if it is equal to case 2, you would execute this and you would break the switch case statement. And this is definitely better than adding a bunch of else statements and brackets. And it's much more efficient. So that's it for this video. If you liked it, don't forget to like the video. And also don't forget to comment. It helps me make better videos. Thank you and have a great day.